I always order the same thing at that corner café, a black coffee, no sugar, no milk. The barista knows me by name, but the one person I notice most isn't behind the counter. She's at the far end, mid-afternoon sunlight catching in her hair, a hardcover book resting on the table in front of her. I glance up, catch her eyes for a second, and quickly look away like I didn't. She smiled, not at me, exactly, but just a flicker of something, the kind that lingers even after the moment is gone. I remember her coffee order too, latte with a dash of cinnamon. I know because she once told the barista softly, almost shyly. A small detail, but somehow it matters more than it should. I've come here more than a few times, usually alone, hovering between my laptop and my phone. I check messages I don't send, draft texts that feel too heavy for anyone to read. I notice the way she folds her napkin after taking a sip, or how her fingers tap lightly against the rim of her cup when she's thinking. Those tiny movements are loud in the quiet of my mind. "Hey," she said once, passing by my table. "You still waiting for the Wi-Fi to work?" I laughed awkwardly, pushing my glasses up the bridge of my nose. "Yeah, apparently it has its own schedule." She smiled, a little teasing, and walked away. I sat there longer than I meant to, my fingers brushing against the cold mug, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling. It's silly, but in that pause, I felt the sort of quiet hope you only notice when it's too late to act on. The loneliness isn't dramatic, it isn't me staring at an empty apartment with tears in my eyes. It's in the small routines I repeat, pausing a conversation mid-text because I don't know if it's worth sending, rereading emails I already answered, sitting on the balcony pretending the city noise is enough to fill the gaps in my thoughts. And somehow, noticing her makes those gaps wider, sharper. She isn't young anymore. Not in the way I am. There's a gravity to her that pulls the air down when she laughs, a quiet knowing in her eyes that makes me aware of my own fumbling. I don't know if she notices me, not really. Maybe I'm just convenient scenery for her afternoon escape. But I can't stop watching. Then it happened. A vibration against the wood table drew my attention. My phone screen lit up, a message from an unknown number. She betrayed me. And I had the proof to show the world. I blinked. The cafe faded around me. My coffee sat cooling, untouched. Her laugh drifted from the corner, soft and unassuming, like the world had gone on without noticing anything had changed. But I couldn't shake the words on the screen. I wanted to ask her about it. About the proof. About what she had done, or hadn't. But the only thing I did was glance once more, lingering just long enough for her eyes to meet mine, and then look down at my phone. And that was when I realized, nothing would ever be ordinary here again. The next time I saw her, it was late afternoon. The cafe was quieter, just a few regulars and the faint hum of the espresso machine. She waved when she noticed me sitting at my usual spot. "Thought I might find you here again," she said, carrying her latte and a slice of lemon cake. Her voice had that soft, unhurried cadence that makes you feel like time has slowed down, even if only for a moment. I shrugged, unsure how to respond. "Guess I have my habits," I muttered, pulling my chair out. She laughed lightly, then sat across from me, setting down her tray. "I used to come here with my kids," she said quietly, almost in passing. Before things got complicated. The words hung between us. I didn't push, didn't ask. I just nodded, listening. Somehow, even without details, it felt like an opening, a tiny crack in the wall she kept built around herself. I offered her the sugar jar, and our fingers brushed for just a second. I almost flinched, almost said something awkward, but didn't. She stirred her latte slowly, eyes flicking to the window before settling back on me. I wanted to ask about her life, about what made her laugh like that, what made her pause when she spoke. But I couldn't. The age gap loomed like a shadow, unspoken but always present. She'd been married once, I barely knew how to handle the weight of my own small apartment, let alone someone else's complicated history. Still, there was something in the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, or the faint smile when she noticed I remembered her favorite cake. Small things, quiet and easy to overlook, but they made my chest tighten in ways I couldn't name. We sat in silence for a while, both pretending we weren't noticing how much longer it felt to breathe in the same space. I helped her pick up a napkin that had slipped off the tray. My fingers lingered on hers for a beat too long. She didn't pull away. "You're not like anyone I've met in a long time," she said finally, almost whispering, almost to herself. I didn't know how to answer. My mind scrambled with imagined scenarios, lunches that stretched into afternoons, conversations that could turn into something I wasn't sure I deserved. And then the doubt would creep in, what if this was a mistake? What if my curiosity was selfish? She smiled faintly, breaking the tension without acknowledging it. "Thanks for helping," she said. Her hand brushed mine again, this time intentionally. Not much, not a declaration. Just a soft acknowledgement of the space we shared. I watched her eyes when she looked at me, a glance that lingered just long enough to make the rest of the café disappear. That one small gesture, almost nothing, was heavier than the words she didn't say. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't see her for a few days after that café afternoon. I told myself it didn't matter. I had work. I had my own small routines. But when I walked into the bookstore that Saturday, there she was, leaning against the poetry section, flipping a worn copy of Neruda. She looked up, startled, then smiled, quick, almost apologetic. "You're here early." "Yeah, needed to pick up something," I muttered, fumbling with the strap of my bag. My words felt clumsy, heavy with all the things I wanted to say but didn't. We drifted between shelves, a slow, careful orbit. Our hands brushed reaching for the same title, and I froze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. She didn't pull away either. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a small frown crossing her forehead. I should probably take this," she said, stepping a few feet away. I watched her move, the quiet rhythm of her body pulling me back into a tension I couldn't name. I tried to focus on the books. My fingers lingered on a spine I didn't want to read. I imagined telling her, maybe asking if she wanted to grab a coffee, but my thoughts stalled mid-step. There was this barrier, a line I didn't want to cross but couldn't resist noticing. A friend of hers appeared around the corner. She waved quickly, smiling, and I stepped back, almost embarrassed to exist in that small orbit of hers. My heart thumped too loudly, echoing off the quiet shelves. She lingered in conversation, hands animated, and I watched every gesture, every laugh that wasn't for me. I wandered down the aisle, pretending to read, pretending that the air wasn't charged with the moments we had almost shared before, the almost touch, the almost laugh, the almost confession. When she returned, her eyes met mine across the aisle. A silent understanding passed between us. I could see it in the tilt of her head, the way her fingers traced the edge of the book she held. I stepped closer. She did the same. We didn't speak. Not really. Just inches apart, our shoulders brushing as we scanned the shelves. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in my throat. My hand twitched toward hers, almost on impulse, almost daring. And then the bell over the bookstore door rang. Someone entered, a child, I think, tugging their mother's hand. She flinched, almost instinctively stepping back, and I stumbled out of the orbit I had been pulled into. The moment broke. Not violently, just, quietly, like a string snapping in slow motion. We exchanged a look that lingered longer than necessary. Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us spoke. But the air between us was different. Heavier. Charged. Waiting. I left the bookstore with the book I didn't really want, feeling the weight of her eyes on my back. I almost wanted to turn around. Almost. And I knew, without words, that the next time, we might not step back so easily. It was almost dusk when I found her on the park bench near the river, the kind of spot where the city feels distant, muted under the soft hum of passing cars. She had her scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, fingers twisting the ends, like she didn't know what else to do with them. I hesitated, then sat down at the other end of the bench. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, exactly, just full, heavy with all the words neither of us had said. "You're late," she said, voice small. Not an accusation. Just, noting a fact. "I got caught up," I muttered. It felt flimsy even as I said it. My eyes flicked to her hands, to the way they tapped against the bench, restless. We sat like that for a few minutes. I wanted to reach over, to bridge the inches between us, but something held me back. Not fear, not exactly. More like, the weight of knowing that if I moved, if I said anything, nothing would ever be the same again. "I saw him today," she said suddenly, not looking at me. Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. My ex came by the café." I swallowed, my throat tight. Jealousy, sharp and sudden, surged through me. And guilt. Why did it matter? Why did it hurt so much that she had a life outside of these stolen afternoons? I started, then stopped. The words I wanted to say, the confession, they tangled in my chest. Almost everything I had rehearsed in quiet nights on my balcony vanished. She shifted slightly, glancing at me, then away. "Sometimes I wonder, if I shouldn't," her voice trailed off, the sentence unfinished, hanging like smoke. I could feel the weight of it, the possibility of her thinking of crossing lines, of saying yes to things she shouldn't. I wanted to tell her I knew exactly what she meant. That I had imagined it too. That I wanted it too. But I only nodded, letting my silence speak for me. My fingers twitched against my knee. The space between us hummed with tension, small, electric, almost unbearable. "Do you ever feel," she began again, hesitating, "like you're falling, and there's nowhere safe to land?" I wanted to answer, wanted to tell her that yes, every day, and that the only place I could imagine landing was here, with her. But I didn't. I just let my gaze meet hers, holding it longer than comfortable, letting the words exist between us unspoken. Her eyes softened, and she exhaled slowly, as if letting some weight escape. A stray leaf drifted onto the path before us, swirling in the evening breeze. She reached down to catch it, holding it between her fingers a moment longer than necessary. I wanted to ask if she was afraid of me. Afraid of herself. Afraid of this. But the words never came. And so we sat there, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's presence, far enough to remain safe. The question lingered, unspoken, heavier than the air around us: would we cross the line if we dared? The next week, she disappeared. Not literally, but almost. The café no longer held her laughter in the corner. Her usual table sat empty. I asked the barista once, casually, as if I hadn't been scanning the door for her, and learned she'd been busy. Family matters. Something unavoidable. I told myself it was fine. Routine. Life. But when I passed by her apartment complex later, catching a glimpse of the lights on in her window, I hesitated, wanting to knock, wanting to say something, anything, but didn't. When we did speak, it was brief. A quick wave, a nod, her voice clipped with distance. She didn't mention the park, didn't reference our bench or the leaf drifting in that evening air. My chest ached in the silence of things unsaid. Then came the hint I wasn't ready for. A text from an unknown number, just her name, a photo of a small pair of shoes beside a crib. My stomach lurched. I hadn't known. Or I had, in vague ways that now felt like omissions. There was a child. She had responsibilities I'd never imagined carrying into the quiet hours we spent orbiting each other. My mind whirled with the contrast, her, vulnerable and inviting at the park, her, with a life I didn't yet belong in. I wanted to ask. I wanted to see. I wanted to retreat all at once. I felt hope. Then confusion. Then a dull ache in the pit of my stomach that made me pause mid-step in the street. I stopped going to the cafe as often, stopped lingering near the poetry section at the bookstore. I stayed home, letting unsent messages gather like dust. I imagined scenarios where I never found out, where she leaned close in a quiet cafe, and nothing complicated it. Then I imagined scenarios where I did, and it all crumbled between us. I caught her once in the park again, briefly. She smiled at me, small, polite, but her shoulders were tighter, the distance deliberate. I wanted to cross the bench, to reach for her hand, but something stopped me, caution, or fear, or respect. Probably all three. I left that day feeling, paused. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence, leaving me with the ellipsis, the weight of what could be, but never fully is. I drafted a message. Something simple. I hope you're okay. But my thumb hovered over send. I couldn't. Not yet. Not now. The cafe chair she always claimed remained empty, even when the corner table filled with other patrons. The same chair I considered mine whenever I imagined she might return. Empty. Waiting. And me, standing outside the door, thinking maybe next time I would knock. Maybe next time, she would let me in. Or maybe not. It was late evening when I found her on her doorstep, keys in one hand, phone in the other. I had hesitated down the hall, telling myself I shouldn't, telling myself it wasn't my place. But something drew me closer anyway. She looked at me like she had just noticed I existed, then gave the briefest, almost nervous smile. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said back, voice rougher than I meant. My hands were shoved into my pockets. I didn't know if I should step forward or stay exactly where I was. The space between us seemed heavy with months of pauses, almost confessions, and missed chances. "I didn't mean to disappear," she said quietly. "It's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you." I swallowed, the lump in my throat stubborn. I don't know what I expected," I admitted. My fingers flexed against my pockets. "But I knew. I wanted to see you again. Even if it's messy." Her eyes softened, flicking down to my hands, then back up. There was a pause, a silence that said more than words ever could. She exhaled slowly. "I was afraid," she said, voice low, almost breaking. "Afraid that if I let this happen, it'd ruin too much." I stepped closer, careful, feeling the weight of that admission. "It's already complicated," I said, almost a whisper. "I know that. And I still want to be here. If you'll let me." Her lips pressed together, her gaze dropping to the threshold between us. Then she shifted her bag, keys jingling softly, and finally, just barely, she touched my arm. Not long. Not dramatic. Just enough to remind me that she existed, really existed, in this quiet space between heartbeats. "I don't know what comes next," she murmured. "Neither do I," I said. "But maybe, we figure it out together." Her lips curved into a tentative smile, small and honest. That was enough, the kind of connection that makes months of hesitation, stolen glances, and silent longing feel worth it. We lingered for a moment longer, letting the evening air carry the tension away. No grand gestures. No declarations. Just a hand brushing another hand, a look that didn't need explanation, a smile that said, "Okay, we'll try." Then she stepped back, unlocking her door, and I stayed on the threshold. The distance felt fragile but real, like the world had paused long enough for us to take a quiet breath together. And I realized that sometimes, the most powerful moments are the ones that almost don't happen, the ones lived in the space between words, in the touch that speaks louder than sentences. Her soft, "okay," as she opened the door behind her echoed in the hallway. And that was enough. Weeks passed. Not the dramatic kind, just ordinary days slipping into each other with the quiet rhythm of routine. I still went to the café at 8:47 a.m., still ordered my black coffee without sugar, and still noticed the little details, the way sunlight hit the corner table, the slight tilt of her cup when she sipped her latte. She joined me more often now, though never exactly at the same table. Sometimes on the bench outside, sometimes leaning against the counter while waiting for her order. We didn't talk about the chaos of the past weeks, or the unsent messages, or the photo of tiny shoes that had startled me. Those things existed in the spaces between words, acknowledged without fanfare. One afternoon, she handed me a tea she had made herself, warm and slightly too sweet for my taste. I smiled, flicking my eyes toward her hands as she shifted nervously, and took the cup. Our fingers brushed, briefly, deliberately. No words, no declarations, just that simple, quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence. We walked together sometimes, side by side, the silence comfortable. I learned the rhythm of her steps, the occasional pause when she noticed something small, a leaf drifting, a bird landing on the railing, and I felt like I was discovering her again, slowly, without rushing. I saw her laugh more freely now, soft and contained, but real. I didn't have to imagine her life outside of our moments, it existed, and I was part of it in a careful, unforced way. I still carried my hesitations, my lingering doubts, but they were smaller, manageable, tucked into the quiet corners of the routines we shared. One morning, on the park bench where we first let ourselves linger together, she handed me a thermos of coffee she had brewed for both of us. I caught her gaze and held it for a long moment. She didn't need to say anything, I understood. Everything that had been uncertain, risky, and fragile had brought us here. To a moment of quiet clarity, where presence mattered more than words. The city hummed around us, ordinary and relentless, but the space between us felt grounded, warm. Not perfect. Not effortless. But real. I sipped the coffee she had made, slightly too sweet, and thought about how life had folded us into its rhythm. We hadn't crossed into some fairy tale ending. We hadn't needed to. We had earned this, small, deliberate, everyday closeness. And in that quiet, I realized something only she and I could understand: love doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it exists in the pause of a hand brushing against another, in a shared cup of coffee at 8:47 a.m., in the subtle comfort of presence over words. I smiled. She smiled back. That was enough. Engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?